Hello, I'm Roger Bisby from the Skill Builder channel, and I'm making a series of videos on the building of London. Today we're looking at the bridges, or some of the bridges, the main bridges. Now this is London Bridge behind me, and it wasn't actually the first crossing in London. They found an earlier one way down by Westminster. This is the main crossing. This is the one that the Romans built. Now why is it here? It's here because the river started to narrow here and it became viable. It didn't have wharfs, it wasn't built up in the way it is now. It just sort of spread out on the banks and it was tidal. They managed to get a wooden bridge built across the river. That required a lot of maintenance, but it's a very popular bridge. It was a main route for them as they marched up along their road from Kent, and it also allowed them to bring shipping into this area here. Eventually, as we know, the Romans were kicked out by Boadicea and the city was burnt to the ground, and the Saxons, who were left in charge if you like, decided that they didn't want to live in this old walled city. Maybe too many ghosts, something going on. They settled further down towards what we now call the Aldwych and Covent Garden, and they built their community down there, and they were quite happy just to use a boat to get across the river. When the Vikings sailed up this river unexpectedly and not in a very friendly mood, the Saxons suddenly saw the advantage of having a well-fortified city, and they moved back into Roman London, built up the defences and the walls, and tried to protect themselves as best they could from aggressors. So I'm going to tell you more about that, and I'm going to show you the actual origins of that Roman bridge, which was built just to one side of this one, and I'll tell you why that is. So just as we go up onto London Bridge, I want to show you these steps, which if you're familiar with Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist, this is where Fagin murdered Nancy. They're now called Nancy's Steps. Actually, they could be called urine steps, because I think a lot of people take a leak around here. So this is the new London Bridge. The other one, the older one, was sold to the Americans. This is a pre-stressed concrete structure, and there was this myth that the Americans thought they were buying Tower Bridge, but that just wasn't true. It was actually just one of those stories that was made up and stuck around. So here we've got the pre-stressed concrete bridge, and it's just done in fewer spans, so there are fewer obstructions in this part for shipping coming through, for boats coming through. But the original bridge was just over here on this side, and the reason that they changed position was obviously that when they were building the new bridge, they couldn't knock down the old bridge, so they just had to shift it over so that they could keep traffic going over the bridge while they were building the new one. So now I'm standing smack bang where the original Roman bridge came over the river, and subsequent bridges were built after that right up to medieval times. These were very complicated affairs very often. They weren't just bridges. They saw it as an opportunity to sell to people, because that's where everybody had to pass through. So there were shops on there, there was a church on there, there were even lavatories on the bridge. The problem with that is that if all those things you put on the bridge, you actually impede the traffic. And that meant that there were often queues of an hour just to pay your toll and get over the bridge. You may be familiar with that song that children sing, London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. The fair lady that they're talking about was actually the wife of King Henry III. And what happened is that the tolls for this old London Bridge were collected by the Crown. And the tolls were there obviously to maintain the bridge. And when the bridge was in need of repair, they went to the king and they said, we need some of that toll money to repair the bridge. And he said, I haven't got it. And they said, well, where's it gone? He said, I gave it to my wife. The City of London very bravely and very astutely decided that they weren't going to give the tolls to the Crown anymore because they couldn't be trusted. And they put the tolls in trust for the people of the City of London. And that trust still exists today. And not only does it maintain this bridge, London Bridge, but it also paid for the building of other bridges, and all the bridges within the city are maintained from that fund that they set up from the original tolls. Now you'll notice there are no tolls on the bridges today. So where does the money come from? Well, very astutely, they've invested that money in property, mainly over the other side of the river in Southwark. That made them so much money from rents. It's now worth about, say, £200 million a year. And out of that, they pay for the maintenance of the bridges. But there's a surplus there of roughly £20 million a year, which they give to local city-based charities. It's a great thing. And I would say that the owners of Dartford Bridge, they said that once Dartford Bridge was paid for, they were going to do away with the tolls, make it free. And then when the day come, they went, you know what, we don't want to give this money up. And they very sneakily kept the tolls going. But not only that, they increased the tolls. This arch here beside the church of St Magnus the Martyr is actually the original entrance to London Bridge. People travelled through here. There was a pedestrian arch and there was a place to get through. You can see that it's rather narrow, but this was it. This is where you paid your toll and you went across the bridge. Now, if you look over here, this is from the Roman wall. A beautiful bit of oak. Look at it. It's as solid as anything. It really is fantastic. And that is all that's left of that original London Roman bridge. But I want to show you something else that's interesting inside the church of St Magnus the Martyr. Now, incidentally, my cameraman for the day is Magnus, so he's very interested to see what's going on. This is the model of the medieval London Bridge, and it's all inside a glass case now, so it's quite difficult to see, but you can see that it's got the shops on it and it's got all these little arches, and the water used to run through there at such a lick that people were drowned. It was a very brave person who went in through these arches in a boat, and the watermen did do it, just thrill seekers. But you can see all these houses built up on this bridge. There was hardly any room to cross. And there's the church, and this is where the pilgrims set off for Canterbury. And because London Bridge actually burned down quite a lot, there were fires. This was the fire engine that they had, which hopefully they could put out the fires with. It must have been a pump of some sort. When you're walking around London, it's a good idea to just take note of all these little signs, because each one gives you a clue about something. This is called the Hanseatic Walk here, and actually what this is commemorating, if you like, this area which is now Cannon Street Station, this was once a German enclave, and about 500 traders, if you know anything about the Hanseatic movement, the cooperation between various cities in Germany, and this was their London link, if you like. This is where the goods that were trading between London and Germany came in, and this is where those merchants lived and worked and carried on their business. And there's actually a plaque there on the wall of the railway bridge which celebrates 60 years of peace between Britain and Germany, and long may it continue. Cannon Street is so called because of the cannons that were once here defending the city, I guess. The next bridge we're going to look at is Southwark Bridge. Now, this is Southwark Bridge, and this bridge originally was built from cast iron that was cast in Rotherham, and it was shipped down here, and it was the largest span of any cast iron bridge in the world. It was arched, and that made it a very steep hill. It was very unpopular with horse and carts. You can imagine that people having to do that climb and then they're going down the other side slightly out of control. So it wasn't used, it wasn't very popular. And the other reason that it wasn't very popular was because it was a toll bridge. All the bridges in London, this one is the one that is used least. And it's actually a very popular bridge among cyclists because of that very reason. Now, it's a sobering fact that in the building of this bridge, 47 men died. And I think when we talk about health and safety gone mad, we just have to remember back in the day when lives were so cheap and snuffed out so readily, they didn't even stop work. That was it. A guy was killed, he fell in the river, and everything carried on as normal. Now, this actually holds another tragedy. This was the scene of London's greatest river tragedy. I remember waking up to the news in the morning that the Marchioness, which was a pleasure cruiser full of young people on a birthday party, it was chartered, and it was hit by a dredger called the Bow Bells, which not only hit it once, but hit it twice. And it was in this very area that those people drowned. 51 people. They held an inquiry. They tried to prosecute the captain and the lookout guy on the bow bells, the dredger, because they'd been out for a few drinks. It wasn't successful, and I think in the end the families of the victims of the Marchioness had to bring a private prosecution against the owners of the bow bell. So the problem with bridges, they do restrict the river traffic, and they also restrict the view. You could kind of understand the guy's coming along and he's not paying much attention. He comes through there and he's met by a pleasure cruiser. All too easy to happen. The cast iron one was taken down eventually, and it was replaced by this one, which is steel. So there are fewer arches on this one, steel being stronger. They actually lowered the bridge down so that it was in line with the other bridges, and that reduced the slope on it. But as you can see, there aren't many horse and carts going over it, are there? That'd be mainly because horse traffic was banned in London. The congestion was so bad and it was slowing down the other traffic that they eventually did away with it. This is Shakespeare's Globe. This is actually a reconstruction done as well as they possibly could, given what they had in the way of drawings. They constructed it here, then they discovered when they were doing a little bit of work down the road, the remains of the Globe Theatre. So it wasn't actually here, but it was located in this area. So this is the bridge, previously known as the Wobbly Bridge and now just known as the Millennium Bridge. And it connects the Tate Modern behind, which is an old power station. That was Bankside Power Station. Fantastic brick building, we'll have a look at that sometime. It connects that with St Paul's over here. Building these bridges was not without its problems. Even when they had computer designs, they still managed to build a suspension bridge that wobbled like crazy. I'm not sure how they actually managed to fix it, because there doesn't look to be anything particularly different about it from when it was built, but they put something there, some kind of suppression. So I think those spring things, that might actually be what they've added to it, stop it wobbling. So now you see me standing in front of Blackfriars Railway Bridge. There are two Blackfriars Bridge, a road bridge and the railway bridge, but this is actually the second one. You do see a pattern emerging here where the first bridge is never a good one. But the first bridge was narrow, it was a railway bridge that could just have two tracks on it, and it just couldn't carry the traffic. And the other problem was it started to sink. So they decided that they'd build another one next to it while the other one was still in operation. And on this bridge, which is a lot wider, they built a railway station. And from there, the railway goes actually underground all the way through to King's Cross. So behind me you can see these red pillars. This is what I was talking about. The original bridge was on these pillars, and that's how wide the bridge was. And you can see that they've incorporated the third pillar into the new bridge. So all the way down, that's still doing a useful job providing support. But the other ones are doing nothing more than giving the pigeons somewhere to sit, a little perch for them. So this is Blackfriars Road Bridge. I like this bridge a lot. I don't know why, but it's, I think, quite an elegant bridge. So you can see the stone piers here behind me. Each one of those is built like a pulpit to acknowledge the monastery that was here, the Blackfriars Monastery. If you want to preach to the world, this is where you can do it from. So the tide's out, so it's a good opportunity to come down onto the beach here. It just shows you what the Thames was like before they narrowed it and built up the sides of it, because it was a wide river, hence the problem crossing it was all the greater. And of course, if you had boats coming across the river, ferrying people as they did, then they either had to have a jetty for the boats to get onto, or they had to bring it up as far as they could, and then the people would get their feet wet. So probably the cheaper boats didn't go on the jetty, and that's the way you got across. This is where the mudlarks come down, so-called mudlarks, and they just fish around and they find all kinds of things, bits of Roman remains, and it's constantly turning up new things. Hopefully no unexploded bombs. Now we come to Waterloo Bridge, which is a concrete bridge really. It's very stark, very modernist, and I don't know, I mean, it's an acquired taste I suppose, but it's never thrilled me, this idea. One of the reasons is that I reckon it doesn't last. It's just not very good building really. I mean, if you look at this, bit of cladding falling away with foam. Double glazing boys have been there. Up here, We've got reinforcing bar rusting away, spalling through. It's just rubbish. Now, the other feature of Waterloo Bridge, which is sometimes overlooked, is the fact that it was actually built by women predominantly. And the reason for that was that in 1939 it was started, and then we went to war with the Germans, and all the men went off to fight in the war, and the women took over the important jobs like the land army, growing the food, working on the farms, working in the factories, and also working in construction. So they had to very quickly train a lot of women up in concrete pouring, welding, and all those kind of jobs. They carried on and they finished this bridge. So everything I said about it not being a very nice bridge, I unreservedly withdraw those comments. Nothing but a coward. Now, you might see this lovely facade outside Somerset House here and wonder why it's so elaborate, because it's not really looking out over anything. But there was a time when the River Thames came right up to here. So this was actually a water gate, if you like. People would arrive by boat and they would enter the building, and then they moved the river, they narrowed the river, and they did it for two reasons. One of them was that they wanted to speed up the velocity of the river, because it was basically an open sewer for many years and it did stink. And the other reason is that Sir Joseph Bazalgette, who designed the first London sewage system, wanted to put a huge brick-built sewer all the way down here, and that is still here today, still doing a great job. And beside it is the District and Circle line for the London Underground. Now, this lovely garden you see here, this is Savoy Garden, it's just behind the Savoy Hotel, and this was all under the river at one point. The river has been pushed back and we now got lovely gardens here. So this is the memorial, the statue to Sir Joseph Bazalgette, who, as I said, designed the sewer that went all the way along here, and also basically the cut for the London Underground, and also the gardens, the Victoria Embankment Gardens and the rest of it. So it was a mover and shaker of his times. He really did a lot of good. So this is Westminster Bridge now, and this is painted green because the seats in the House of Commons are green. All these little hidden messages that mean nothing to anybody. Now, when Westminster Bridge was built, there was a lot of opposition to the building of this bridge, mainly from the watermen who were making a good living ferrying people across this bit of water. It went on for so long, the dispute and the resistance to it, and they were a pretty powerful group, and they probably have just sabotaged the bridge anyway if people try to build it. So in the end, the watermen were bought off. They were paid a bribe or a compensation. It was the equivalent of about £2 million today. William Wordsworth wrote a poem here. As he crossed Westminster Bridge in a carriage, he was so taken with the view that he wrote this poem saying that earth contained not a sight more lovely than Westminster Bridge. And I'm not sure that if he crossed it now, he would feel quite the same way about it. It's nice to have all these tourists spending all this money. Now, this lion was actually originally on the Lion Brewery down in Lambeth. It survived the devastation of the war, although a lot of the brewery didn't. And when the building was cleared, it was decided that it would be brought down and preserved somewhere else, and this is where it ended up. One thing about this lion was, at one point, it was pretty well endowed, being a lion and not a lioness. I don't know, maybe the Prudes were offended by the sight of a lion's testicles and male member hanging down from below, so they chopped him off. No wonder he's got that expression on his face. Memorial to the Special Operations Executives, unsung heroes, the female heroes in the war. Now, this is Lambeth Palace. It was actually the Archbishop of Canterbury's London home. It was just here, tucked away opposite the Houses of Parliament, because I think the church and the government were a little bit intertwined in those days. The church had a lot of influence. Lambeth Bridge is the last bridge we're going to look at in this particular little excursion. It's painted red because that is the colour of the House of Lords benches. So down there we've got the House of Commons bridge painted green, and then up here we've got the red bridge. Nobody's managed to make a red that is UV resistant, so they're fading the House of Lords, their colour, and that may be prophetic. So these pineapples on the end of Lambeth Bridge, there's a lot of different theories about why they are here actually. I think it was because this is where they grew the first ever successful pineapple in London down here, but I don't know. People used to come and look at pineapples. In the exotic fruit market, which was in Covent Garden, people would actually make a little excursion to come and look at pineapples because they were such a wonderful and different material. Nobody had ever seen them. Quite a steep bridge actually, Lambeth Bridge. Difficult for the old horse and cart to come over. When they wanted to build a bridge here, it was resisted. And the reason for that is that if you look over there, Horseferry Road. And Horseferry Road is named because there was actually a horse ferry that used to cross the river at this point. It had a couple of horses on it and that drove paddle. So those horses going round and round and round propelled the ferry across the bridge, and that was it. That was Horseferry. When they built the bridge, the horse ferry wasn't needed anymore. A couple of horses were made redundant, not to mention the blokes who were running the bridge. You would never imagine that bridges could be so divisive. You can see that gate there. Now that would either have been a sewage outfall or a way in. The fact it's got that bit of jetty there suggests that they had some kind of standing there. They took goods from there down to the river. Or maybe that was the jetty where you got on the horse ferry. Downing Street along here. Now we come to Tower Bridge, which a lot of people think is London Bridge. It's definitely the most distinctive and recognisable one of the major icons in London, really, isn't it? And it's a lovely bridge. It's only actually just around 1900, 1890 that it was finished. You can see the lovely lights all the way along. The whole thing is illuminated at night and looks very nice. And then as you go along the lights, you'll notice that there's a light missing on one of them. Well, the reason for that is that isn't a light at all. What that is a chimney, and it was actually a chimney for the guards room, which was down below. They guarded the bridge, and you can see just down there they've got a new structure. There's actually a police box down there actually, just beside the Tower of London. But anyway, it's a cast iron chimney, so back in the day when they used that would have been warm. It's actually got the maker's name there. It says it was cast by Durham Brothers in Bow Road, 205 Bow Road. They even put their address on it in case anybody wanted to order one. Now, when they built this bridge, they had a bit of a problem because they weren't allowed to impede the traffic. They had to allow the river boats to go through, all those tall ships to sail through. So after various schemes, various ideas for building a bridge, they came up with this idea, which was a suspension bridge with a raised bit, a drawbridge in the middle, rather along the lines of a medieval drawbridge, and that could be lifted up. They thought, well, what about the people that are walking? So they came up with the idea of putting walkways across the top so people could climb a spiral staircase on either side and then walk across and walk down the other side, which is quite an arduous thing to do. It's even more arduous when you're carrying stuff. Most people didn't bother. They just stood there, and when the ships came through, they took a break, put down their parcels and their goods, and just stood and watched the boats come and go, and were happy to do with that. So the walkway was not ever really used in any meaningful sense. And now you have to pay a few quid to go in there. Well, that was a bit of a fluke because I didn't know the bridge was actually going to open. You can check the times out, they're on the website and so on. And you can see when it's scheduled to open. But I didn't know it was going to open. I just came over it, and lo and behold, it opened up, which was great. There are a lot more bridges on the Thames. I've only just taken the first of them, and there's a lot more going all the way down to Hammersmith, which are interesting. And Hammersmith's got a story in itself. While I'm down here, we might as well have a look at this. This is Shad Thames, and now you can see the old docks, what's left of the old docks and the cranes, beautiful cranes. Well worth a walk. And these are basically, I think, where the rivers came out as well. I don't know what river this is that comes out here. It's not the New River for sure. But isn't it a fantastic area? A lot of people won't come down this far. They come down as far as Tower Bridge and then they stop. So if you fancy doing something a little bit different when you come to London, you've got the time and you want to get away from the crowds, then this bit of Bermondsey, just east of Tower Bridge on the south side of the river, is well worth a walk. So that's it, I'm going to call it a day now. I hope you enjoyed that, and if you want to see more, on the London bridges or any of the other London walks that I'm doing, bringing in a bit of history but very much focused on the building rather than the kings and queens. So let me know what you think, let me know if you want to see more, and I'll do my best to oblige.